maybe it's my fault. Maybe I led you to believe it was easy when it wasn't. Maybe I made you think my highlights started at the free throw line and not in the gym. Maybe I made you think that every shot I took was a game winner. That my game was built on flash and not fire. Maybe it's my fault that you didn't see that failure gave me strength, that my pain was my motivation. Maybe I led you to believe that basketball was a God-given gift and not something I worked for every single day of my life. Maybe I destroyed the game. Or maybe you're just making excuses.
You have a left hand, Nick.
Do I have a left hand? I do, but do I use it for basketball purposes? That's probably the big question you're wondering there, right?
That is the big question. And I guess if you are watching this podcast and wondering how good are you, and are you good enough to become a professional basketball player, that's probably one of the first questions to ask yourself. How is your weak hand? So obviously, if that's you're right-handed, and that would be your left hand, and if you're left-handed, that would be your right hand. And ultimately, can you use both hands in any given situation on the floor in a basketball game? And I think that's a big one here that many kids think about, but they don't put enough work in. Okay, and I think it's a one that really, really stands out, especially in games and in tryouts and in elite and high level basketball, that in a situation where classic one is that the left side of the floor is open. I'm right-handed, obviously, so I'm talking about the left side is my weak hand. The left side of the floor is open, and I don't want to go left because I don't like the left side, even though it's open. I would prefer to go right, or I will obviously go to my right hand on the left side and obviously be in a much more vulnerable position to be obviously blocked at the rim in that situation without drawing a foul. That is the sort of situation where you will want to go away and work on that weak hand much more if you do not feel confident in finishing with it, especially at the rim.
Well, it's not even just your level of comfort. It's also, especially if you're climbing through the ranks, the defensive schemes that are against you. It doesn't take long for players to figure out this guy's always going right or this guy's always going left. And the second that you allow a defender to almost relax and know that you're only going to go one direction, you make their job even easier. So, the emphasis on having your opposite hand, even if it's just for an escape dribble, even if it's just to be able to clear the ball, cannot be overstated, because it's very easy to trap players. They'll just, if you're going right-handed and you won't let go of it, they will trap you along the sideline. That's the plan. Or they'll get you across half court and box you in there and, have quite an easy defensive scheme against you.
How good are you a shooter? That's the point here that you need to consider if you want to become a professional basketball player. Now, we all know nowadays game stretches out to 30 feet from the basket, but it's a progressive steps that takes you there. Okay. Again, a lot of players I see nowadays love to shoot threes, all warm up, all game, all day after school, every single day. And once you take away that 3-point shot, they can't make anything else. Okay. And I think that's an area where, as a basketball player, if you're looking to take it to an elite level, you need to build all aspects of your shooting, starting with the fundamentals. And that's obviously the motion, okay, and the follow through and the high release, okay. And everyone shoots different. That's the point. There's no picture perfect textbook Ray Allen shot that everybody shoots, as much as we all like to shoot that, okay. But you go away and you master your shot, okay, focusing on that sort of release and that sort of elevation and the rotation of the ball coming off your fingertips and your follow through, okay. And then you go away and you be able to knock down that 10-footer, 15-footer, 18-footer, then you're 22 feet at the 3-point line and beyond. And at that point, if you're willing to go and put the work in and you can consistently, okay, make those shots, okay, once again, in a game, it translates into a player that can score on all areas of the floor once they're given the space, okay. And if you're one of those players, you're on the right track. But if you're a player that goes, oh, well, I'm great at shooting threes, but, you know, if I get a lane and I drive into it and I can't make that 15-footer, I think you've got a bit more practice there. Go back a few feet, all right? Keep shooting some more reps there at that 15 feet.
Well, there's so much more though. So it's not even just layups, right? So layups are an easy way to get points, but as you progress through either the years, so perhaps you've got a child that's playing under eights or under tens, most of the points come from layups, right? And then even in your older year levels, you'll get potentially 8 or 10 points on a lot of leak outs or a lot of like easy layups, but eventually that stops. Eventually the paint gets kind of packed, or the defense is pretty aware of it, and that's when the shooting comes in. Now, you mentioned, you know, all of these different types of shots, but that's just distance, right? So, you know, there's low post shots, there's high post shots, there's off the dribble, there's sidestep, there's step back. There's open shots. Like, that's an underrated one. Just open shots, right? So when you do tryouts for specific teams, they are not putting defense on you for every single shooting drill. They actually need to see, hey, can this guy knock down 50, 60, 70% of the open shots? Because if you can't even do that, all right, well, there's a TikToker, I cannot remember it. It's a shame I can't. There's a TikToker who was very famous. He'd over dribble and then he'd throw up threes and he'd just brick it every single time, right? But he looked really good while doing the dribble moves and then just bricked it on the threes. You don't want to be that kid. You don't want to be that guy. You've got to nail your open shots so that when a coach looks at it, says, okay, he's hit 8 out of 10 threes pretty much every time. So we put him in a game situation. We can drop that safely down to 4 out of 10, which is the percentage that teams are realistically going to accept. But if you go into a shooting drill, no one's around you, it's a quiet gym, and you go 1 of 10 or 2 of 10, and it's not just once, it's every single time, then there are things that you need to look at. Are your shoulders not square enough? Are your feet not set? Is there something wrong with your follow through? And there's so many guides that you can get either from coaching or from, you know, videos to fix that up, that you probably need to work on that. Now, when you look at the NBA, there are players that fix their jump shots as the years progress. Lonzo Ball's probably the best example, who came in with a really wonky shot and then straightened it up. And his 3-point percentage has gotten better every year. But then there are a couple of players that never seem to put it together. You know, you look at players like Shaquille O'Neal, Dwight Howard, who never really figure it out from the free throw line. But the difference between them and probably you is they're kind of like 7-foot behemoths that I think are just physically built in a way that they don't have the finesse to do it. But for the average player, you should be able to improve your jump shot.
You're absolutely right. I think that first section there, I was talking about range and obviously mixing up the spots that you can score from. But you're talking more so about scenarios. Okay, and that's a huge one there. Can you finish with contact? Okay, can you finish with that open look? Like you said, you know, you've got plenty of space here, no one's closing out. Can you knock it down? Can you finish with a hand in your face? Okay, can you finish when you're, here's a classic one, tired? Okay, can you still shoot that ball at a high percentage when you're tired? And I think I could name another 100 scenarios, but the point here is that as a player, when you're working on your game to hopefully maybe become professional one day, okay, you will need to create these scenarios in so many, in as many ways as possible. Okay, and the easiest and only way really to do so is to play basketball in all shapes and forms, whether that's playing at school with mates and a similar level, maybe playing against older players as well in a going to the playground or in the local park sort of situation, and just playing in all different scenarios so you can work on these sort of shots and playing to the point that you're tired. Okay, because if you're playing to the point where you're exhausted, that's simulating a situation where you're now in the 4th quarter of the game and it might be a high stakes game and you're tired, and now you're going to go out there and got to get a bucket. Can you still get that bucket? Can you still knock down that shot? And shooting, I think, you know, we all talk about that, just shoot free throws or just shoot threes. Okay, there's so many aspects of shooting, okay, that you know you're never going to master them all, but if you can master some of them, then you give yourself the best chance, I think.
Well, even just the free throws that you mentioned as well, there's a lot of analytics that go into it, especially high-level scouting, that look at certain percentages. So let's say you're a player that comes in and you're shooting 80% from the free throw line, but 30% from 3. There is, for coaches at least, with shooting coaches, etc., there's enough potential there in your free throw shooting that they can translate that to the 3-point line. But if you come in and you're shooting 30% from 3, but 50% from free throw, then they're looking at you saying there's a fundamental issue with your game. And if you are somehow good enough to have those statistics, but also be playing at a high level, then again, the defensive schemes that come against you is put a tiny bit of contesting on the threes, and he's probably going to miss, or she's probably going to miss. And then on the free throws, like, well, we'll foul them because statistically speaking, we're only giving up 1 point, not 2.
Get your fundamentals in place. Are you a player that is a defensive stopper? It's not really sexy, right? Is it, Nick? You know, you don't really get a t-shirt that says defensive stopper and you go, I'm Draymond Green, or I'm Rudy Gobert. Yeah, I wish I was Rudy Gobert. But defense is at least 50% of the game. Okay. You know, you spend half the time trying to score and at least half the time trying to stop the other team from scoring. And if you are going to be a professional basketball player, you be better a exceptional defender. That's probably one of the best ways to give yourself the best shot of going pro. And that means taking pride on every defensive possession to stop that player and to help your team stop the other team from scoring. So whatever that is, so whether that's a rebound because you go back a step with a box out, because you put yourself in that right position, because you've obviously contested, and because firstly, the most fundamental point here is because you wanted to grab that rebound or you wanted to get that stop. One of the challenges that I have as a coach to players in the defensive end is, can you shut down one player? That's a challenge. Okay, because I don't give the message often to my players that you're supposed to, well, I never do, that you're supposed to shut down another team. Okay, that's a collective effort between 5 players. If I have 5 players and each one is willing to shut down one player that's similar size, hopefully, to them, one player that's similar sort of speed, perhaps, to them, because that's the best matchup we're finding, and you can put your best effort in to slow them down, to contest every single shot, to make their life as hard as possible when they're trying to get a bucket. Now we have a team that's probably going to be highly successful in that sort of way. And you can see already that there's teams in the professional league that don't have 5 players that have that mindset. You can get away with it with a couple, you know, 1, 2, 3 elite defenders in that sort of sense. But if you want to go pro, you probably want to, you know, and like you said in an earlier section here, that, you know, you're probably not a 7-footer, 300 pounds in that sort of line up. So, you know, you will want to be able to go out there and however big or small you are, be able to make, you know, life hell for that other player that you're, you know, matched up against, and pride yourself on the defensive end. And that would be a huge, you know, attribute to your game.
Well, there's 2 things of logic that I guess I'd put in. So number one, it's quite demoralizing if you're a strong defensive team, right? And the amount of easy buckets that you create by pressuring, creating some turnovers, you know, having a couple of easy layups in a game really helps your flow offensively, right? And even if you have a bad shooting night, but you created 8 to 10 points off layups or, you know, easy transition buckets because of steals, you can, I guess, validate your offensive game and say, you know what, didn't shoot well, but I still had double digits, right? And that was actually done off the backbone of your defense. But then the second thing is you might be able to drop 30 or 40 points a night. But if you're a cone on defense and the other team figures that out and says, go at him every single time, and they score 20 to 30 points as well, your coach isn't oblivious to this, right? Your coach isn't going to look at it and say, you know, well done, great shooting, and I'm going to ignore the defense where they got 10 easy layups off you. They will eventually have to make a decision. Now, maybe at lower levels, you know what? 5 people just called in sick. I've got no subs. Go for it. I can't do anything. Maybe I'll bench you for 5 minutes because you are our best offensive player, but you're hurting us defensively and I'm trying to make an example out of that. But as you keep going, as you keep getting higher and higher and higher, that will get you pulled off the court, right? Because not every game is going to be a 30-point game. It's actually not a variable you can 100% guarantee. You might come across a team that has 7-footers everywhere, and all of a sudden, offense is so much harder than it once was. Maybe you didn't sleep well the night before, and now you're a little bit tired, and you don't have the legs underneath you. The defensive effort is actually something you could guarantee every single game, right? Your offense, you can't really guarantee. I've had games where I've scored 40, and I've had games where I've scored 5, right? I'm trying to score most of the time, but it just doesn't always flow like that. But defensively, you know, when we're not tangibly looking at, oh, I didn't have any steals and I didn't have any blocks, but what was your defensive effort, right? Did you have a hand up on every shot that you came across? Did you box out on rebounding? Did you communicate to your teammates? You do those things. It doesn't really matter about the box score. Coaches will notice that on a sustained level.
communication on the floor. Well, if you don't even know what that means, you need to Google those few words, starting with communication. And then think about the games that you play when you've got a player on your team or maybe on the opposing team that never shuts up. And especially on the defensive end. Okay. And if you're not that sort of player, that's okay. We're not all Mr. Never Shuts Up on the floor. But are you doing enough communication in a game to help your teammates? And that's an area where, as coaches, as a coach, I really don't see very much of. Okay, it's a lot of things like obviously just rotations, communication, who's taking who. Okay, coaches can't call timeouts as much as we'd like to every 60 seconds to remind you of your assignment and decide that we're going to change this assignment because this kid's burning you for one reason, he's taller, maybe he's faster than you. But you got 4 other guys on your team out there that are all wearing the same uniform as you, that you guys can probably figure this out yourselves, especially when you're a bit older and at a higher level, that, hey, mate, this kid's a bit taller than me, but he's probably a better size for you. How about this kid here? He's a bit faster. I'm a bit faster. How about I take him? And that sort of communication, okay, is so valuable to a team and to the team success, okay, that if you can be willing to and learn to communicate with your teammates and your coaches in ways that help you achieve the goal, whether that's a defensive stop or offensive basket, okay, that's going to be a huge asset for you to be able to take your game to the next level.
Well, obviously, when you say communication, I wanted to make a joke that trash talk is not the communication we're referencing here, or complaining to the referee, because that is communication that I often see when I'm coaching or reffing or playing. But yeah, you're totally right. It's the defensive side of things, or even the offensive side as well. We always think that we've got to be silent, right? Oh, I'm going to get a steal or a block if I don't reveal my location by saying anything out loud. It's not how it works at all. In fact, there's a level of intensity and chemistry that's built instantly by being a communicator on the team or having a full team of communicators as well. I know when I've played, even just locally, for example, you'll come up against a team and that team all of a sudden is calling out switches, screens, open man in the corner, watch the shooter, etc. And all of a sudden you realize in that moment, well, this team isn't a pushover, right? Because they're kind of traits and skills of players who understand the game of basketball, but also are invested in winning. And again, it's one of those things that coaches would look for naturally. They're going to look for people who are communicating, acting like a floor general, acting like a defensive anchor. If we had to do an NBA comp as well, listening to players talk about Draymond Green, or even just listening to some mic'd up sessions from Draymond Green, the amount of instruction that he's giving his teammate to assist them is huge. And so even though he's not a box score, I can't think of the word at this point, superstar, he's constantly directing his teammates, constantly pushing them in directions or helping them out. And that inadvertently is helping the team get better. And I think, if you're doing a tryout, if you're doing something at an elite level, you want to be able to perform at your best. And so if you're doing something for your teammates and then it creates a culture where they do it for you, it's kind of an everyone's winning situation. It's not just about the one game and the win that may occur. It's just about the overall growth that you're going to get. And naturally as well, you're going to get paired up with players who see the court differently to you, and not guaranteeing that if you constantly hear someone do something that you're going to pick it up as a new skill, but there is a chance that you osmosis a little bit through and become a better player.
Hey, you talked about communication there in regards to like screens and stuff like that. And I'll be honest, when I play games, it can be challenging to be able to pick those situations sometimes, especially in a high pace, high level game and stuff like that. So I think the starting point for communication, let's say talk about say 10 or 12-year-olds, okay, is simply taking the feedback that you acquire in the game and sharing with others on your team. And it can be simple as this kid number 10 on the other side, he's left-handed. Okay, he's left-handed. I've noticed he's left-handed. So let's try to push him to the right side. Let's see if he's got a right hand, like we were talking about. Okay, and that sort of situation. So then now you share that information. Maybe another player on the other team has hit 1 or 2 threes. Okay, and you've come off the floor and you share, and everyone probably spotted this, but you can share that with that player that you slapped hands with. Don't forget, this guy's a shooter. Let's make sure we close up that space. We're not going to give him another 3. Okay, because again, It's just little pieces of information that you can share and communicate within your own team to your coaches and to your teammates that really, like I said earlier, can really help your team be successful. And that's a highly valuable asset. Willingness to accept roles. Are you willing to accept your role in a basketball team? Guess what?
I mean, I am now.
You are. I guess. Would you believe that the coach might have an opinion, rightly or wrongly, of you as a basketball player, especially as a junior, of certain things that they would like you to do, and maybe certain things they don't think you do so well. And sometimes people and coaches ultimately don't think you do those things so well, perhaps because they haven't observed you doing those things so well. So here's a good one, okay? If you're not the best free throw shooter, here's a simple example, yeah? Coach is probably not going to put you at the free throw line when there's a technical foul. Yeah, okay, so if there's a tech foul and he's got to select someone to shoot the free throw shooter, he's going to try and choose the best free throw shooter. So if you think you are deserving of going up there at the free throw line to shoot those freebies, okay, you can go away at training, okay, and work on your free throws and show it to your coach, okay, that you can knock down those free throws, okay. So then it will then obviously give him an opportunity to perhaps select you to make those free throws. And that's just a real simple example because there's many different roles in the game of basketball, including rebounding, screening, getting that bucket, shooting that three. Okay. Coach ain't going to draw you up a play to shoot a three if he has never seen you make a three. Okay. So if you are going to want that play drawn up for you, you will need to demonstrate that during training. Okay. Through your hard work and through the efforts that you put in there. Okay. And then obviously then you'll give yourself that chance to be able to provide that role. Okay. And there's 100 roles that happen in the game. And are you willing to play the roles that you were asked to throughout a game? And that's a huge area of being a professional basketball player, because if we all think about it, not everyone is a superstar in the league, but there's plenty of role players in the league that have highly successful careers too.
Well, there's one thing that popped into my head instantly when we were talking about junior basketball, and that's if you're the parent of, or you are the person, the child who had a growth spurt and suddenly is 6 foot or 7 foot, and everyone else in the court is 5 foot. You're going to be playing center or power forward. Sorry. You might be able to dribble and shoot, etc., but you naturally, or your body has kind of put you in a position that you have to view as an opportunity, right? So maybe you did shoot a lot of threes when you were junior, and then you had the growth spurt, and now you're taller than everyone. Well, let's practice some low post stuff, all right? Let's use the strength. Let's see how easy the game of basketball can be when you do have that size advantage. And, yes, that can make you complacent, but if you have the right mindset, you'll get through it. I think another one as well, playing time would probably come up in this conversation. Let's say you made it onto a rep team, or you made it onto a higher level team, but you're getting 2 to 5 to 10 minutes a game. You're not getting a lot of time. You got two opportunities with this. You can say this is crap and the coach is out to get me, or the coach has favorites and I don't care. Or B, you can look inward and say, I wonder why I'm not getting more court time if I am as good as I think I am. Because the reality is, all right, and I'm going to say this, 9 out of 10 times, you're not good enough. There's probably 1 out of 10 where there's some weird thing going on where the coach has to play a certain kid because he's getting extra money on the side, or there's some corruption, or he's sleeping with one of the parents. I don't know what you want to do. But ultimately, you're probably not good enough, right? That's really what it boils down to. It might be because of some physical limitations. If you're 5 foot and the rest of your team's 6 foot, maybe it's like, hey, look, as good as you are, we can't put you on the court in games like this. Maybe it's a close game and you just have a notorious history of always throwing the ball away or making bad decisions. Maybe you didn't show up for training 2 weeks in a row and the coach is kind of using this as an example for you. I'm not too sure what your specific circumstance is, but I guarantee you, if you were really good enough, they could not deny you the court time. All right. I think we look at certain players in the league. LeBron James, I'm just going to use this as an example. He just rocked up in a Drew League game. They weren't going to take LeBron James off the court pretty much ever. They understood what he was, they understood his skill level, and they were pretty much happy to do whatever it was with him. All right. And we all kind of wonder, how did he just rock up at the Drew League? Well, he took someone's spot, probably. Someone basically was like, I'm not going to play today because I'd rather watch LeBron James. And if you are that good, you will not be sitting on the bench for 35 of the 40 minutes of the game.
No, absolutely. I think at the end of the day, minutes is a big one. Being able to understand and play that role, and accept the minutes and accept what's being asked. Again, I've seen players leave teams because they say, this team's not very good. Well, those are perfect examples for you to get many more opportunities, because guess what? When you're in a team that's really deep, suddenly the complaint is, oh, well, everyone's really good. Now I'm not playing any minutes. So I think, accepting the role, finding the opportunities in that challenge, okay, and making the most of it, that's a big part of being able to take your game to the next level. Can you read a basketball whiteboard? That's the question we're asking you here in this podcast. If you've never had a coach pull one out before and draw you up a play when it's a 2-point game at the end of the game, the answer is probably no. And that's an area where hopefully somewhere you'll be able to be presented an opportunity to learn to read a whiteboard. Okay, and here's a bit of a different one, because it's not something you can really learn yourself. It's one that you'll hopefully be in a scenario or in a team where obviously you have a coach that does use a whiteboard and uses it productively. Sometimes I've seen coaches run their subs on their whiteboard. That's probably not that productive, yeah? So I think the key here, though, is a whiteboard is a critical tool to learn how to understand as an elite player, because at the higher levels, being able to, in a 60-second timeout, understand what you're trying to achieve in the next 20 seconds of the game, okay, is a real important facet of the game. Okay, and I guess if you don't get that opportunity within obviously a domestic competition, or even maybe in a rep when you're starting off at a younger level, the best way here is to really maybe to look online for footage and stuff like that. You can probably pick up some of that stuff of whiteboard timeout situations. But the reality here is that being presented with a drawn picture on a basketball floor and the X's and O's and what they're supposed to achieve, that's a huge asset again for an elite basketball player or player that wants to obviously become professional, and what you're trying to achieve with the 5 players on the floor.
I think, obviously, yeah, number one, if you have aspirations to be progressing in basketball, or if you think you're already really good, but you're on a team that never uses a whiteboard, reality check right now, let's be honest, all right, because you're not actually at that level yet. But two, the purpose of a whiteboard is, very, very important for in-game situations. So you might have plays that you run that your coach teaches you. You might say, all right, this is an out of bounds play. This is a sideline inbound play. This is what we do if there's 5 seconds on the clock. But in a game situation, you might have a multitude of things. You might have something come up in the game that kind of changes the defensive scheme or the offensive layout. So yes, understanding the orientation of the board is huge. Understanding what symbols or markers mean. Not every coach is going to treat it like 2K, where they write PG and then your surname underneath it. They might just use numbers such as 1 to 5. They might just simply say follow that circle. That's what you're going to do. And the board gets messy real quick. And so you've got to make sure you know exactly what your job is on that board. And obviously an advanced player would know what everyone's job is on that board, because it'll link back to our communication, where you might get onto the court and it's a 1-point game with 4 seconds left, and you look over to one of your teammates and he's looking a little bit shell-shocked, or he's looking a little bit concerned about what's going to happen. And you're able to tell him, hey, you've got to move over there, because you remember what the board is. And again, even throwing it back more, playing your role. In a last-minute situation, whatever it is, someone has been designed to catch the ball. Now, you might need a contingency because that gets broken up and the defense obviously prevents that from happening. But ultimately, you don't break the play because you're feeling, don't worry, guys, I've got this. I'm feeling like a hero right now. You've got your job. And if your job is to stand in the weak side corner and be a distraction, then so be it. If your job is just to set the pick, then you set a really good pick, right? If yours is to inbound it, make sure you know we want to inbound it and add some flair to it, right? If you know you're going to inbound it at half court, maybe do a little bit of a fake towards the basket just to create that space. There's a lot of things of reading the whiteboard, and even just in training as well, in training.
Look, whiteboard, if you have a coach that even does a little bit of stuff on the whiteboard, that's a huge benefit. I'm not saying he's going to be necessarily a high level coach in that sort of sense, but just being able to outline what the goals are that, he's hoping maybe to occur on the floor. So whether that's even pulling out the whiteboard at training, I know I do that back in my sessions with rep teams. We go over the whiteboard stuff at training sessions, because I know that's the same look that we're going to have in a game when it's a high stakes situation with 30 seconds left to play and we're down by 2 points. Okay, so we look at the whiteboard then, and learning how to understand that whiteboard, not only the X's and O's, but a little bit like you alluded to, also things like timings, okay? Because it's not all, let's all run at the same time. We need this to happen, then this to happen, then this to happen is the last step, okay? And again, too many players sometimes stuff that up because they haven't really paid attention, firstly, and more so often is they simply never have worked off a whiteboard before. And that's an area where hopefully you'll get some reps in. And if you don't, well, you're gonna have to find yourself a situation where you can get those reps. I want to have a chat about video feedback. And obviously it's a area where I think many players don't really utilize, which, you know, you probably could quite readily and easily do nowadays, considering everyone has a mobile phone. And it's as simple as getting like your mate to go, hey, film me for a minute or 5, okay, while I go through the things that I do on the court. Because I think, again, I talked about that bubble that we all sort of, you know, sometimes form a little bit of ourselves as a player. And it's one that's created, I guess, that because you don't really see yourself play. You know, you always think you shoot like Steph Curry, right? You always think you dribble like Kyrie. But then when you get some video feedback, you might actually notice that your follow through is not as great as it is. Perhaps, you know, your elbow's a little bit sticking out the side. Perhaps, you know, you're not really, you know, getting off the ground as much as, you know, you could or should. In all different aspects, perhaps when you're dribbling, your eyes are always pointed to the ground. Okay. And I think this is a sort of situation where video feedback in a simplistic way, whether getting a mate, or get your mom or your dad to just film you for a few minutes in the driveway, just shooting around, or at the local park. And obviously then looking at your own game in that sort of way can really help you continue to find areas to improve. I think, again, it's one that I think often is underutilized, considering today's day and age, and really could be used a bit more to help you take your game to another level.
Well, it's also that objective feedback. So, all right, you know, we've heard the feedback from peers, you know, from our coaches. All right, we don't like that feedback. Well, record yourself doing something that they've been talking about, and you might incidentally find that objectively on that screen right there and then, all right, they're right. I'm not putting my hand up on a closeout. I'm not holding my follow through. And then it kind of removes a bit of the emotion that can happen in feedback. Now, if you record yourself and everyone watches the video and says, dude, you aren't putting your hand up, and you're adamant you are, then you'll be on help. I'm not even going to lie to you at this point. If you deny video evidence that you're doing something that needs to be worked on, we can't help you. But if you are able to look at that video feedback, then fantastic. It's as simple as propping a camera up at home. You know, a lot of kids have iPads. I think even schools, especially during remote learning, promoted a lot of this behavior during PE, like, you know, online PE lessons. They got you to record yourself doing something. So you should be somewhat used to it at this point. Obviously, filming in a game is a little bit different. I know I'm personally, I feel like there's a bit of a desensitization towards public filming these days. I feel like we're all very quick to just start filming people, but there probably is some legalities behind that. Some clubs / stadiums might have rules about that, so just double check. But especially things such as your shooting form, where you're looking on those kind of things, that's all really important. And it's a stepping stone into watching film. So it's not done at many levels, but when you get to the higher levels, watching film is a big component of it. And picking up player tendencies before you ever actually physically play that player is a big component of video feedback. So definitely something to look at. There's a lot of great YouTube channels as well that do it. I'll plug 2, Thinking Basketball and B-Ball Breakdown, 2 coaches that do a really good job of freezing frame, talking about things, slowing it down. And also indirectly, it's not about you, but you're watching film basketball and maybe picking up some tricks or tips as well.
Look, watching film is a whole nother level, I think. But you're absolutely right. I think watching film, watching just short clips of yourself and all the other things we've talked about in this area about how good you are and how good you want to be ultimately, it's all part and parcel of the bigger picture. You know, if each piece helps you just that little bit with your game, you know, then you're on the right track to continue to getting better and better every single day. How good are you? That's probably a question you ask yourself every night. Yeah, you lie in bed, you go, you have dreams of playing maybe professional basketball, maybe playing the NBA one day. But how do you know how good you are yourself? And getting feedback, obviously, from others around you is a big area to be able to understand where your game is at and what others think about you. Now, let's be clear here. Firstly, I'm not saying go ask your mum or your dad how good you are, because they're always going to tell you you're the best player they've ever known because they love you. So you might need to go and get some critical and unbiased feedback. So again, that doesn't mean go asking your best mate, that you obviously beat up every day after school, how good you are, because you always score on him and beat him every day. So you must be really good. That's going and asking, obviously, starting with probably your coaches, okay, and obviously going to play other elite players that you not necessarily know that well to begin with, and just getting feedback from them and having those sort of conversations, what they think about your game, and potentially what sort of feedback they have for you on areas that you can improve on. Okay, because I think often as a player, you live in a bit of a bubble sometimes. We all probably been there. Yeah, you sort of have a great perception of yourself, and that's perfectly fine. Okay, having that positive perception of yourself, but you're going to need to allow in some feedback for you to grow and for you to become the best player that you can. And I think, coaches is probably a big area where you'll get that unbiased feedback to help you grow your game.
Well, you get that unbiased feedback, but you might only get it a couple of times depending on how it's received. So, one thing that I'm sure you've dealt with in your coaching experience is you've given some feedback, and then that feedback has done a 180 via a parent, where maybe they're not too happy with what you just said, or maybe they don't agree, and with their actions, they withdraw their child from the team, or they stop showing up for training. There's lots of different ways that people receive feedback. Now, not every bit of feedback is going to be productive or useful, right? That's kind of just a reality. And you see so many anecdotes of people who denied the haters or didn't listen to the haters. And you might have a coach that really isn't validating what you need, isn't helping you grow the way that you need, but there's a professional way to handle it, right? The player that I'm going to reference here is Kevin Porter Jr. Kevin Porter Jr., currently playing on Houston, has a lot of talent and always listed as someone who's very interesting, but has a personality issue, right? And there were a couple of instances during the season where he walked out at the halftime. He had some disciplinary action put upon him. And now currently they're having contract extension talks where the contract extension talk is it worth contract extending him? So your talent will get you to a certain point, and in his circumstance, it's gotten him very far, but it will hit a limit and potentially put a ceiling on your potential when perhaps that ceiling needs to be a little bit higher, but your personality is getting in the way. So taking on the feedback, applying it, or even just actively looking like you're seeking and applying it as well, that's kind of a trick. It's hard for juniors, right? And it's probably not something you learn until you're older as well, and you're probably doing some full-time work. But ultimately, accepting the fact that the person who's telling you something is telling you that for a reason, right? And again, 9 times out of 10, it's probably not because they hate you. Because as someone who's coached before, I did that as an additional thing to my normal full-time job. I promise you, when it was late at night and I was struggling to sleep, it's not because little Timmy doesn't know how to shoot a jump shot. All right, it's everything else in the world besides little Timmy not shooting a jump shot. So when I go to training, I can switch my brain on and say, Timmy, I need you to square your shoulders. I need you to get a little bit more lift. I need you to hold your follow through. You don't want to listen to me, Timmy? I'll tell you the same thing next week. Maybe I'll stop telling you because I'm going to go work with John instead, because John actually took the feedback 2 weeks ago.
And sometimes as a coach, the most simplistic but important piece of feedback that we can share is go get more reps. Go get more reps. Okay, it's not that I don't have a detailed 100-point training plan for you to get better here, but all you need to do is go get more reps. Okay, so whatever skill set that is that, I'm observing that maybe you're a little bit shaky on or not so confident in, go do more of that. Okay, and the more you do of it, the better you'll get. This second section of this podcast, we wanted to cover a few things in regards to your mindset. Obviously, in being the best player you can, maybe hopefully one day being pro. And the first area here we want to talk about is obviously warm-ups and preparation before the game. Maybe Nick will talk about a bit after the game too, after your injury history. But I'll focus a bit more on about before the game. And I think the biggest one here is that how many players, maybe you're one of these players, that you're in your teenage years, that go, warm-up's not important. And we see that all the time, right? You go, I can just run out there and start playing. But it's not really that you got through that game, without getting injured and, who cares about warming up? It's preparing yourself for when you are professional, maybe hopefully you're still playing in your, 30s, okay, that you have that preparation, the care for your body to work it as at 100% in these sort of extreme circumstances, throwing out there against other players and trying to win a game of basketball. And it's one that I think is, we teach it as coaches, hopefully, most coaches do this, but it's one that's so hard to get players to buy into sometimes because it's just not that glamorous. And sometimes in a game on a weekend or on a Friday night, sometimes there's not much time as well for these sort of areas. And this is where a player's own preparation before a game, okay, things like, getting that roller out or doing some stretches, whether that's static or dynamic or whatever works for you. I'm not going to go and pitch you the best ways to warm up, but the point here is that putting in some time to warm up so you are ready to go physically and mentally in a game. Because what happens when you're warming up for a game, we should be at least, is thinking about the game, thinking about what you want to do in that game, thinking about the sort of plays that you're going to make in the game that will hopefully help your team get that result that you want. Okay, if you're obviously walking into the game and the last thought you've been thinking about is that game you were playing on the PS4, 30 minutes ago, you're probably not in the right mindset. Okay, and that warm-up opportunity, that warm-up time, okay, really helps you to put not only your body into getting ready to start to be as, go to work, but also gets your mind ready to start to focus on what you're trying to do in the next 40 minutes or so.
I've got to do in case there's a young person watching, PS5 is the current generation. All right, let's keep it current.
PS5
for our listeners. But you're totally right about the warm-up stuff. So look, the hardest part is when I was younger, you can run around, roll out of bed, do it all again, roll out of bed again, and keep doing it. And you could even have a late night and eat McDonald's all day and still roll out of bed and probably be okay. This is habit building for the future, right? The reason why players like LeBron James are so special is because he's going into year 20 still being an elite level, and everyone can chalk it up to, well, he's a freak. He's a freak of nature. Athletically, it's crazy, or he's just really talented. Yeah, all right, maybe he is an anomaly. But then there are other players in the NBA that have long careers that aren't on his level. JJ Redick, very popular podcaster, and now he's doing some ESPN stuff. He had a 15-year career, and a lot of people wouldn't know about it, right? There's actually a lot of guys in the NBA that get to 10, 15 years, and they're not LeBron James stature, but they get there because they take sustained level of care of their bodies. Now, when we're talking about warm-ups and preparation, there's the mental aspect, as you alluded to, where you're staying focused on the game, you're staying in tune with things, and then there's warming up your body. We're probably going to cover a little bit more of that in the lifestyle section as well, so I won't double up unnecessarily.
How much basketball do you play with other elite basketball players? That's a question you got to ask yourself here. If you're going to go pro, how much elite basketball do you get? Because again, I spoke earlier about sometimes we live in a bit of a bubble as a player. Yeah, we live in a bubble as a player. We think we're, really good. Maybe we are pretty good. Okay. But that idea is created and formed from the basketball that you play most frequently. So whether that's in the domestic competition where you're beating up the opposition and scoring 20 points a game, but maybe you're in Division 5. So time to move up to 4, 3, 2, and 1, hopefully. Now, are you still dropping 20 points in Division 1 at your age level? If you are, that's great. But here's the point. You don't have to stop there, because if you're dropping 20 points in Div 1, okay, and you're obviously feeling that you love basketball and you want to take this further, you can play up a level 2. Okay, if you're supposedly playing under 14s, you could play under 16s. Can you drop 20 points at under 16s even though you're only 13 years old? Okay, and there's many casual scenarios to also provide yourself that elite competition. All right, even just at the casual ballpark, playing against older players in that sort of situation. Don't get me wrong, you might still beat them up, great, but sometimes you'll find that that's not always the case. Okay, and I think it's easy sometimes to get lost in the, I'm really good because I score a lot in the lunch break, when I scrimmage with my mates. But you really do have to find yourself in the elite sort of opportunities where you'll have others that have similar goals and have similar skill sets And then you'll have a better measure of where you're at and what you need to work on to obviously keep growing your game.
Well, there's a phrase that I'd want to utter. It's water finds its level. Um, and if you're actively seeking your level, then you will find it. But if you don't, you actually might miss that opportunity. So it's important for you to take those opportunities to play with someone else's team if they offer it to you, or going up that extra level. But I actually interpreted this dot point a little bit differently. When you're working with others with similar goals, or if you're trying to find your level, even if you just do a shoot around, if I called you up and said, hey, I want to do a shoot around, at least my experience of shooting around, 9 times out of 10, you have a chat, you shoot, putting up some shots while you do it, and then you play one-on-one, and then you go do something else. We could hypothetically, hey, today I want to work on my jump shot, right? I want to do set shots at different locations. Can you rebound the ball for me? Then I'll do the same for you. That's having a similar goal. If you want someone to be your defender, be like, hey, can you put just a hand up? Because I'm struggling at this point of blocking out the defender, and I just need to tunnel vision the ring. I don't need you to block me. I just need you to be there so I physically shoot over something or someone. That's working with a similar goal. And it's the same as everything, where it might be dribbling, right? Hopefully the person you're with, if they're, in a feedback loop, that will give you a tip. Be like, hey, this is what I do for this, or can you do this dribble move? There are things that you can gain off other players that if you're creating those opportunities, they're there. If you're with similar-minded people, and this especially happens in the teenage bracket, right? We're going to shoot hoops for a little bit, and then we're going to go to the shopping center, or we're going to go to the park, or we're going to go to someone's house and play games, or we're going to do something illegal, because that also happens in the teenage bracket. But ultimately, who is your social circle, and how are they helping you grow as a player? Because all of those things come into it. All right. And we understand the importance of peer pressure, or, social groups at this age bracket. But if you really do have those aspirations, surely you're looking at those guys in the NBA that get drafted at 18 and 19. I don't know what your age is if you're listening to this, but if you're a teenager, the earliest eligible is 13, and you got 5 years to figure it out. So yeah, those silly nights where you have parties that you shouldn't, or where you're always playing PS5 on the weekend, maybe aren't as productive to your future NBA career, if that's your aspiration.
So this next area in regards to mindset has to do with game results. Hopefully, if you're going to become hopefully a professional player, you're playing obviously competitive games. You're hopefully playing probably at least domestic somewhere at a higher level, because you're pushing yourself. And hopefully, I guess in Australia, you're playing at a rep level too. If you're playing overseas, hopefully you're playing at one of the the leagues that give you that high elite level of competition for your age group in that sort of sense. And in that sort of scenarios, then you're obviously going to play games that have results, where you win games and you'll lose games. And I think one of the areas here in regards to mindset is, what does a professional player, and a good professional player, don't get me wrong, not every single one would be like this, but a good professional player be able to take away from both sets of results? It's easy, obviously, to get wins and pat yourself on the back and go away and have a celebration and have a party and we won and I played great. Okay, but on the other end of the scale, what are other things that you can be more critical in those sort of results when you do win? Okay, what are areas where you could have, maybe done a little bit better? And I'm not saying that you can't go away and pat yourself on the back and celebrate the victory, but I'm saying that always looking for that self feedback, okay, is the first step, and looking for feedback from others, okay, like we alluded to earlier, from coaches and from peers, within your team too, and those that are non-biased in those sort of opinions, is a huge area there, because we all know that when you lose a game, you're going to hear a whole bunch of feedback. You could have shot it better. You could have played better defense. Yeah, you could have, rebounded the ball more. Okay, and that sort of situation is easy, but are you willing to hear it? And what are you willing to do about it? And this area here is all about mindset. So when you win, what do you think about? And when you lose, what are you willing to listen to? And what are you willing to do about that?
I think obviously the obvious thing that I'm going to touch on, even though if I'm touching on it, you've probably got a problem. You can't hyper-react to winning or losing. You can't instantly go to blame mode when a game gets lost, and you can't instantly go to hog the credit mode when a game is won. In the grand scheme of things, you potentially are going to play hundreds, if not thousands of games. So the results ultimately won't matter too much. Really, it doesn't matter until you're competing at that elite level. And even then, there is some reality to it, right? If you are that person we mentioned before where the court time's a bit limited, your role and responsibility for winning and losing is reduced. That's just a fact. If you do have a high role on that, but let's say, for example, you're the only one putting in a defensive effort and the rest of the team isn't, well, we can't guarantee wins in that, but we can still guarantee a bit of a career path for you because coaches do notice that, right? So if you're familiar with the scouting process for everything, they are constantly looking at teams, plucking players, and then putting them into the higher levels. They're not taking teams, right? If a team goes 24-0, they're not taking all 5 players to the NBA. That's not how it works, because they'll look at the talent individually. They'll look at the effort individually, and they'll see what the potential is. They're not going to take everyone. So winning and losing doesn't even result in you gaining the success that you think it does, right? Maybe you have played on a winning team and you've won the championship 6 years in a row. Doesn't mean you're good, just means you're on a winning team. So you have to take it into perspective. Really, it's a team result, and as a team, you should brief or debrief about it. But that's as far as it really goes. In terms of your individual growth, your stat record isn't that important for a very long time into your professional career.
Yeah, look, I think going back to the specific games, and I'm sure yourself as a coach too, you said it right at the start that it's too often a blame game. I think it's when you lose, and I don't know, statistically speaking, what you lose every 50% of your games, right? So you play win some, lose some, right? If you're winning over 50%, you play pretty successful, yeah, you're on a pretty good team, more often than not. So that it's a situation where when you lose, can you put your hand up? Can you say at least internally to yourself, what can I do better? So then when I play this team again next time, hopefully, we'll have a better result. Maybe it will be a closer game, or maybe we'll get a win next time. And there's always that sort of feedback that you can give yourself and do something about it. And that's hopefully something that you do, because that's probably an important step to really taking it to the next level. Do you set yourself game goals? And it's a little bit probably, as I think about it, like 2K has achievements. And sometimes the achievements when I play 2K are a bit ridiculous, in all honesty, and maybe they're not so important. But it's a similar sort of concept, and it's a similar sort of mindset. We talked about warming up and preparing your mind for a game, leading to those situations. But what do we think about? Do we think about, as a player, what am I going to do in this game? I'm going to score 20 points. Am I going to score 20 points and grab 10 rebounds? Okay, I'm going to make all my free throws. So what does that look like? Okay, what does that look like? And obviously you've done all the work throughout the week shooting free throws. You've done all your practices. You've done all your shooting as much as you can, all that sort of stuff. But there's nothing more valuable than having the right mindset of visualizing what you're trying to achieve in a game. And I think it's not something that's often talked about or coached or taught maybe, but it can have huge positive aspects to the output that occurs when you are in a game situation. So even just visualizing those free throws that you're supposed to, you will shoot, that you want to shoot during the game. Okay, I think, and how you're going to obviously, get that follow through, how you're going to get that ball rotation, how you're going to go through your routine and all that sort of stuff, and ultimately how you're going to see that ball go into the ring, as many times as possible during the game. These sort of mindset things, I think, really do help you take your game to the next level. And one of the most simple ones is that sometimes players that, often don't score too much, okay? You go to them, hey, I'd like to see you score a bit more. Maybe you say, I'd like to see you score 16 points this game. And they go, man, how am I going to score 16 points? That's, I usually don't even score 10, yeah? But if you think about this, if we're playing 4 quarters, obviously, which we'll play on a Friday night at the rep level, that's 2 buckets. That's 2 buckets a quarter. And I get it. You don't always get minutes every quarter. You don't get the same minutes every quarter, but that's 2 buckets a quarter. If you can set your mindset to getting 2 buckets in a quarter, that's 1 bucket. Let's get 1 bucket, and then let's get 1 more bucket somewhere in that quarter. And you do that for 4 quarters, you've got 16 points. That's it. And if you can do that on a fairly consistent basis, and you said that earlier, Nick, that sometimes you'll have bad days and sometimes you'll have better days, that you'll be able to get double digits more often than not. But you're going to have to put yourself out there. You're going to have to shoot those shots, okay? And you're going to have to set yourself the right mindset to be able to achieve that sort of goal. And whatever that goal is, whether that's getting 16 points or making a free throws or just, making those sort of plays to help your team win. Think about it before a game. I think that's really important.
I think it's the game within a game, because sometimes, especially if you're noticing that you're more advanced than the other people you're playing with, it can get a bit monotonous, right? So I personally have played in grades that are below my level, and it becomes very much like I'm getting a light jog and I'm scoring 20 points. And if you're being productive with that session, well, is this a chance that I only score with my left hand? This is probably more like elaborate stuff, but do I want to do a couple of post-ups? What do I want to challenge myself within this game to keep stretching, right? Because ultimately you want to have specific goals, right? So we don't want any of this stuff where it's like, oh, today I'm going to play hard and win. Yeah, like that's not measurable. We actually don't know by the end of the game if you did either of those things. Only you do, and really that's not the intent of the goal. You would like to be able to articulate your goal to your coach. You would say, coach, today I would like to get 1 defensive stop, or I'd like to get 4 free throws, or I'd like to get 10 points, or I would like you to tell me how I did with my defensive footwork. Because sometimes the goal doesn't have to be internal. Sometimes externally you could ask for it, or you could get it provided to you. But these goals help you along the way. All right. And we'll throw it back to the very first thing we talked about, left hand, right? Or your offhand. A lot of the time, maybe one of your goals is, I would like to score 1 layup with my offhand, or I would like to dribble with my offhand. And that goal could be as simple as, when I bring the ball up the court and there is no defensive pressure, I just dribble with my left hand for a little bit just to get the rhythm in. Or it could be, as elaborate as, every time I drive to the key, I'm going to be using my left hand. Ultimately, it is up to you. But if you did that every single game you played, right, and you're playing 1 or 2 matches a week, or you're doing 100 matches a year, or whatever it may be, those mini goals will have results.
This third section that we've titled in this podcast is a bit about your lifestyle. And if you're going to be a professional basketball player one day, some things that you'll need to make some adjustments to, if you're not already doing this, to your lifestyle, and to consider. Starting firstly with, how much basketball practice are you actually putting in? Now, that doesn't mean you're putting hours working on your jump shot in 2K on the PS5, Nick. Yeah, is that right? Every kid's now got a PS5. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Because I know kids go and they play a game, they go to training, they come home and they play PlayStation all day, and they go, this helps my game. I've heard that one, yeah, from my own kids. Yeah. Rubbish. Rubbish. Okay. I'm going to call you out right now. Okay. It's good fun and you're a basketball fan, but it doesn't help your jump shot in real life on a competitive game. So go out there and play some real 2K by going to the playground, putting on your snazziest threads that, cost your parents real money, and bringing your basketball and whatever hairstyle you want to pick for the day, and find a pickup game, and that will help your game. Because the more you pick up a ball, the more you spend playing basketball and putting in the reps and all the things that you learn, the better your player you'll become. Okay. And whether you turn into a player like the professor, yeah, the Professor Nick, yeah, he's not a pro basketball player per se, but he's obviously gone down a route where, he's become an elite entertainer, I guess, in the basketball industry. Or whether you go down a route where you become a Harlem Globetrotter, or you play the NBA or somewhere else that we'll talk about down the track tonight as well, that every part of this helps you become a player when you go out there and pick up a ball in real life, okay, and shoot around against competition.
I guess you've covered a lot of the just playing, so I'll cover the more obscure stuff. Habits that are small end up equaling, something big by the end of it. So, if you practice your offhand dribbling for 10 minutes a day, which in an isolated moment is a very short amount of time, doesn't take too long. You could do it in between games of 2K if that's what gets you out of the house for 5 seconds. If you do that every single day, it's 70 minutes a week, right? Which is over an hour. And then it's essentially 4 hours a month And then if I can do the quick math in my head, we're looking at close to 2 days of practice in a year on your offhand. And we don't want to encourage people to just spend 24/7 playing basketball, because there's elements that we'll cover in the next couple of sections that say that's not sustainable and it's not healthy. And everything needs time to recover and consolidate and kind of just happen gradually. We can't tell you right now, if you just start dribbling 10,000 times in a row, that you'll be a good dribbler by the end of it. It's not tangible like that. It takes a long time. It just takes a lot of things. There's a lot of variables that we can't explain. But creating little habits, right? Finding those extra times to do something and using it purposefully, right? So, all right, I can go in my backyard and shoot around for an hour, but did 50 minutes result in me lowering the ring to 6 foot so I could do lots of dunks? Because if it was, yes, you shot around for an hour, but it was not productive for most of it. All right. Or when you were shooting around, what were you practicing during it? Were you kind of like putting up game speed shots? Were you just putting up like weird lobs? Were you trying to do a finger roll from 10 meters away? There's lots of things that can kind of come into question with that. And depending on how serious you are, you have commitments, right? So we're talking probably to juniors at this point, but homework, social groups, relationships, if you're choosing to have that at this point, additional sports, if you're playing more than one, tutoring for a couple of people, there's things that can take your time away from basketball. So that's the more reason why it needs to be productive. So if training is one of the only opportunities you get to pick up basketball and use it, then the lifestyle choice I'll talk about here is, are you focused during that training session? Or is it actually just like, hey, I'm seeing my friends and I'm going to talk to them the whole time? So, the old heads on new shoulders would say, use that time wisely, because it does run out eventually. And you only get a certain amount of window to really get these skills or get your experience before you've probably hit a ceiling.
Look, and I was thinking about this the other day, actually. I think if you're obviously a basketball fan, you're watching this podcast and, maybe getting something out of it. One of the greatest benefits of basketball is that you can really work on your individual game, despite being a team sport, as much as you are willing to put in the time and the effort that we're talking about. I think if you think about some of the other team sports, it's probably much harder, I would imagine, to work on, say, like your footy skills by yourself, or even like your cricket skills by yourself and things like that, because it's just not physically possible. You'd have to find a mate. Yeah, you'd have to find someone to come down. But with basketball, you can really just take your ball, and I'm going to say go down to the local park, because like you said, Nick, it's too often the temptation that you put that ring a bit lower at home, or you go, wow, I'm shooting really well on an 8-foot ring with a size 6 basketball. that you go to the park and you'll have a full court there, or full at least half court there, in most playgrounds around here, I guess. And you'll get the full basketball experience. Obviously, you'll get the conditions as well that you'll deal with being outdoors, but you'll get the full size scenarios. And you know what? Maybe you'll even find someone else that's shooting around too. And again, that's a perfect opportunity to sort of take your game and that practice and that opportunity, to one step further. The second part of this lifestyle area we're talking about is perhaps what you're putting into your body to become an elite basketball player. And, I'm sure we all do this, especially when we're younger, a lot of fast food, junk food, soft drink, things like that. And all in moderation. Isn't that what they teach us in school, Nick? All in moderation. Yeah. So
Correct.
this podcast is not like don't eat Maccas or don't drink Coke. Okay. But it's like maybe you could cut down on some of that sort of stuff and consider, if you are wanting to become an elite basketball player, perhaps a better balance and a better leaning towards a much more healthy lifestyle in regards to what you're putting into your body to fuel your game. And look, like I said to you before, I'm not a nutritionalist. I'm not here to give you a menu plan on what you should eat and so on and so forth. I'm sure there's plenty of YouTube channels there, and Google's a great resource. Hell, I'm sure if you talk to your mum or your dad, they might even be able to go, hey, here's a list of things that I think would definitely help you eat to be healthier, okay, and help your sporting sort of game progress and feel good about that sort of situation. And again, everyone's a bit different. Okay, everyone's a bit different. Okay, so you got to find what works for you. just because it says, I know a lot of places say eat pasta, yeah. eat pasta for some reason before a game, right? Because the carbs or something. Yeah. And look, I'm going to say I don't necessarily subscribe to that, but if it works for you, that's great. But finding the right sort of preparation and lifestyle in regards to what you eat, okay, again, really does help you be ready to perform, I guess, at your best when it comes game time.
So, look, from my understanding of the public education system, at least in Victoria, you will get some basic nutritional advice throughout your schooling.
You reckon?
And there's also, well, there is, like you'll talk about food groups, especially in secondary health groups, but we also talk about healthy food choices at primary level. Okay. I think we all can figure out chocolate cake is delicious, but it's not probably helping us the way that we want. And I think one of the traps that young people fall into, and even people in their 20s, is I am, I hate to say it, but I don't look fat, so therefore I'm fine, right? Even though I eat poorly, I still look skinny. I might even still have a six pack, for example. This is the joy of metabolism at young age. This is not you making good choices and getting results. I have a very funny anecdote, but one of the best cross-country runners at my high school was a known smoker. All right. Do you have any idea how frustrating that is? That I was playing a lot of basketball at the time, pretty fit, but watch that kid just run past everyone. And everyone knew that he was smashing a pack of cigarettes every day. Not advocating for that. I'm just saying your bodies are kind of weird when you're a teenager. Okay. What you're doing, you're setting up healthy habits or unhealthy habits in that circumstance, but the results maybe don't always relate with what they should. They'll catch up with you eventually, but they don't relate at the time. So diet's a really big one. Fruit, vegetables, your carbohydrates such as pasta, as you referenced. Eating bread but not putting Nutella on top of it if you're having toast. Not overeating, not eating at random times such as 2 a.m. in the morning. If you do have fast food, it's not every day, it's once a week or once a fortnight. These are basic guidelines, but you can get nutrition advice from a specific nutritionist. You can talk to your local doctor. They'd probably give you a basic plan. You can Google these basic plans. But the other trap is without working with someone one-on-one, your information is different to theirs. All right. So height changes what your body needs because, you don't need as much food when you're 5 foot versus 6 foot or versus 7 foot. And males and females have differences. Even, cultural backgrounds have differences as well. I'm not going to go, I already feel like I'm ranting, but I'll bring it back a bit. There's so much that goes into nutrition that you either need to educate yourself or find someone who can work alongside with you. And if you don't want to do either of those two things, then probably just stop having fast food all the time and you'll instantly notice something better. Because even if you're not looking fat and you still have that, you still have muscles, you will be surprised at how much better you'll feel in a game the day after doing this if you eat properly. And I guess that transition is to sleep. And I'll go on my rant about sleep. We know that teenagers struggle to sleep. All right. There's a bit of research going on. Potentially in the future, we'll adjust our school days to accommodate to teenagers so they don't have to get up as early because they like to be a bit more nocturnal. But you're going through massive growth changes. If you think about when you enter as a teenager at the age of 13 and you exit at the age of 19, it's a small window, but a lot happens, right? I went from being about 5 foot and chubby to 6 foot and relatively athletic by the end of my teens. And other people go through much more drastic changes. So a lot of that comes from sleep. A lot of that comes from recovery. A lot of that comes from just getting the sleep that you need. So we can't guarantee that you're going to get 8 hours every night. You hear that because not everyone needs it. Some people function off a little less. Some people need a little more. But the big thing is, if you have a game tomorrow, don't have an all-nighter. Don't go to a party and stay past midnight. If you know you have to be up early for training, don't just wake up 5 minutes before you have to go. Don't just, play games till 2 a.m. in the morning. There are healthy choices that you can make. It's boring. Okay. It's boring. And you know what? There are probably a couple of people, and you hear anecdotes from NBA players that they went out partying all night and then they came to the game and they were fantastic. You are probably not statistically going to be one of those people that is just naturally good, irrelevant of how well you take care of yourself. And these are, again, the controllable things. The last anecdote that I'm going to do, DeAndre Ayton just signed his contract with Phoenix finally, and there were apprehensions about getting that. Now, one of the anecdotes that's come out was he stays up all night and plays video games. And there's questions about his work ethic, about his focus. Now, he might have a $133 million contract. That's his natural ability really carrying in there. But that apprehension to throw max money at him last year, give him 5 years, and really talk him up to be a superstar is potentially due to lifestyle choices that he's making. And it might work now, but in 4 or 5 years' time, when he's a bit older and he's a bit more banged up, those choices, if he's still making them, probably are impacting him more then than they are now. And if he's setting up this habit now, there are questions about the habit moving forward. And I'm sorry that was so long.
That's all right. I didn't realize you also had insider information in the Phoenix Suns organization, but clearly you've done some reading up. Is that right, Nick?
Correct. I love reading up.
But look, I think to sort of from my perspective to finish off this sleep and recovery area, probably ties in with one more word is sacrifice. I think you need to think about if you are a teenager hoping to play elite professional basketball, what are you willing to sacrifice? And it's a tough one. It's a tough one. Don't get me wrong. We've all been through those years when we had parties and late nights and mate says, let's go do this. But, I got basketball training tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock or whatever. That what do you sometimes have to say no to? Or sometimes, here's a balance, might have to leave it earlier. I think that's a situation that, often happens too for players that go, well, I can't stay till 2 a.m. for this party, but I can stay till 10 and then head home and get enough sleep for the next day's whatever, basketball activities that I have. And you already alluded to it. Sleep is critical for development, and that's a no-brainer. And I think, again, it's just finding the right amount of sleep for each person. Some people will obviously function of more sleep, and some people function of less sleep, and finding the right balance of rest and recovery for yourself as a player. So then when you are arriving at a game that you're feeling ready to go. And I think, you want to be arriving at a game feeling at 100%. If you're arriving at a game feeling at 50%, then you got to consider why. Is it something that I ate earlier today? Shouldn't have eaten that steak, an hour before the game? Or is it because, hell, I stayed up 6 hours last night playing games till 4 a.m. So I'm now tired for my game in the next day. And these things to consider. But if you can find that balance, okay, maybe it's getting in a nap even, before your game. A lot of players do that, and pro players do that too. Get a nap in before their game, and then obviously get ready for the game and do all the prep stuff and then head to the game. And you're arriving at your game feeling 100%. Then you're ready to perform as best as you can. The last area here in regards to lifestyle that we've going to talk about is, how is your body developing in regards to strength and conditioning, and ultimately being physically the best player you can be? We talk a lot obviously already about skills and mindset, and they're all critical components. But hey, it doesn't matter if you got the best shot in town, shooting stroke in town, and you've got the best positive mindset every time you walk out there, but the player comes up to you and he bumps you a little bit and you fall on your ass. So it's also, again, you talked, I think, earlier tonight about LeBron and Shaq and how obviously fortunate they are to be those sort of physical sort of people that they are. And not everyone's built that way. So sometimes, often, if you're going to take your game to the next level, we're going to have to put in a bit more work. And, starting at, say, like an under 10s level, that might be things like doing things around the house, like push-ups, sit-ups, squats, planks, stuff like that. None of this stuff involves any sort of additional equipment. As you get older, obviously, then you're talking about gym equipment, dumbbells, barbells, and getting maybe a bench press and little things like that. Hell, if you can't, afford that or don't have those sort of resources, there's many other things you can do, like pick up bricks and stones and things like that. I'm sure we've seen those YouTube guys and the TikTok guys that have sort of built their own gyms in creative ways where they can get a workout with water bottles, like, those huge water gallons, like 10 kilo sort of weights that they're just, doing reps with and stuff like that. End of the day, there's no excuses on why you can't continue to build your body and strengthen your body and condition your body if you are wanting to become an elite basketball player. And it is a critical area of the game that you'll need to work on, constantly to be able to maintain that sort of strength and stamina that you'll need to perform every single game.
Well, obviously with gyms, being a teenager specifically, it's a little bit tricky for you to get into every gym. Some gyms don't enable it, so that's one hurdle. But as you're alluding to, home workouts, things like push-ups, sit-ups, calf raises, squats.
Long list. Yeah.
I think long list of home workouts that you can do with your body, and that's without having to do anything extra. That's one thing. The second is cardio. That's a part of fitness, right? So it's probably the one area that you can, you should be able to do, because we talked a little bit earlier about jump shots getting weaker as the game progresses. Well, naturally, maybe you are a good shooter, but you're not a good shooter when you're fatigued. You could practice shooting while you're tired, or you could just develop your cardiovascular strength and get better at that. Obviously, as well, with the gym and fitness, this is not necessarily about making you better in game. You might notice some details there where you don't get pushed around as much, or you feel a bit quicker, or feel a bit stronger, or even feel a bit springier. It's actually just injury prevention, right? It's a way of you knowing that I am taking care of my body so that if something happens, my body can react to it appropriately. Because there's a lot of things that can happen in a basketball game where your muscles don't do their job and you get hurt. And then I guess the other thing that I'd mention with this as well, it's again a healthy habit. So let's say you don't end up becoming a professional sports person, but you do understand the discipline that's involved in taking care of your body outside of sport. Maybe you stop playing basketball altogether, but you keep that as the habit. There's just benefits along the way that aren't even, related to being a professional athlete. So gym and fitness cannot be overstated. Really, again, something else that high schools potentially do. I know that in my high school, we did have a gym on campus. So that was something that, we could access, we could get information on. And again, YouTube is now littered with things for home workouts, even for gyms. Sorry, distracted.
I think that one last point I want to add, you talked about cardio and stamina, obviously, absolutely 100%, being able to run and perform in that sort of way, the whole game is critical. But I want to sort of really share here that I really think it's important to consider what sort of activities you put into to help you build that area. So I'm going to not recommend things like running on the treadmill, running around the block. I swear parents say that a lot, go run around the block and things like that, because these are all things like high impact sort of, options to build cardio and fitness and stamina. Really consider things more like jumping on a stationary bike, even swimming. Hey, if you like swimming, swimming's great. I think for the overall body, to just really build muscles and sort of just get that stamina increase, because at the end of the day, and this firsthand, Nick, the mileage obviously in your lower body is a big area of management as a basketball player. And if you're putting in mileage on your body, in all aspects of your body, while training, at the end of the day, at some point, it doesn't really, your body, says it's had enough. And I think, so therefore the methods that you obviously go away and put in this extra work in the gym and working on strength and cardio and fitness is also important. And, like we said, there's plenty of great resources there, talking to a personal trainer at the gym, or even those guys that work at the gym, talking to your coach, they got probably some pathway they can offer you there. And obviously online, hundreds, no doubt, thousands of YouTube videos that will show you exactly what you can do and how you can break it down, and finding sort of what sort of goals you're trying to achieve ultimately in your game through, I guess, physical training. Of the podcast now, hopefully you've gotten to this point, is to sort of just, the question basically we pose here is, what is success in your endeavors here? Obviously you're maybe hoping to become a professional basketball player. You're wondering if you're good enough to become one. And the message, I guess, I'd like to share here is that it's all about progressive steps. Okay. And obviously, there's no guarantees. That's the reality. I know I spent many, many hours, on my game, and a lot of the things I talk about here outside of training, outside of school, sacrifices I made, parties I didn't go to, all these sort of things. Yeah. And, I didn't become a professional basketball player. Okay. But at the end of the day, that's not necessarily the end of the world. I think that's something that I want to sort of really share. And I think the progressive steps here that you want to consider is how can you work your way through each level? Okay, so maybe you're a domestic player at the moment, and I think I touched on this a little bit earlier. Can you work your way up to the best team at your club? Okay, in the highest grade, hopefully, of your age group. Okay, they're probably your first goals. Then obviously, then you're looking to join a rep team. Now, obviously, in a rep competition, that's where most players already straight away get a reality check. They go, oh, so no, hold on. I was scoring 20 points a game on a Saturday afternoon, and now I'm playing rep, and the coach doesn't even play me. Okay, maybe it's because of one of the few things we talked about earlier. I got no left hand. I can't stop a person in front of me at any possessions. Okay, it doesn't matter if I do get buckets at times. My coach ain't playing me. Okay, so I think again, once you hit the rep level, trying to get yourself to that highest rep team. So obviously the first team at your club, and then obviously performing in one of the highest divisions, which is VC, obviously on a Friday night, and getting to that level of competition. Now you're playing the best of the best. Okay, and if you're now still excelling, playing the best of the best at your age group at that level, okay, then you can obviously then continue to progress your way through the next steps. And obviously in Australia here, there's things like Youth League, there's things like NBL 1. A lot of players here will obviously jump to the US college system, which is a great opportunity, no doubt, to be able to go over the US and play basketball and get that real experience, life experience there. And then at the end of the day, I think I'd like to sort of suggest that, if you listen to this podcast and, in 5 or 10 years time, or however long it is that you work on your game till before you become an adult, perhaps, that it's not, we all talk about making it to the NBA. And I think if you take it to the highest level that you can take it, I think you should be proud and pleased of all the efforts that you put in. It's not everyone can become an elite basketball player for many reasons, and that's the reality. Okay, I think there's this real good article I read a little while ago about how the statistics are against anyone in 90% of demographics because of simply the resources and the size and the sort of opportunities that you'll get. But there's obviously overseas competitions too, in leagues, in Asia, in Europe, and stuff like that, and in other pro leagues, and semi-pro leagues as well. And if you're, obviously passionate about basketball, you can, take your skill set and your game to, one of these sort of levels. I think you should be really pleased and proud of all the efforts you put in so far.
Yeah, this is where we go against a lot of the advice and we go on the more subjective route. So objectively, you're probably not making the NBA. I'm sorry. It's just how it goes. It's statistics. There's only so many slots. Yeah, I think the number is 450 players at any one point, and the average NBA career is about 3 to 4 years. It's not a long time. And we admire the big names and the big players, and those people are generational freaks. Really, they are. LeBron, we constantly question the greatness. He's that good that it wouldn't matter if he was born in the 50s or in the 2050s. He would be playing in the NBA. He's just that good. And there are other people that benefit from the era, and there are other people that benefit from circumstance. And then there's people that benefit from things not happening to them. You will have, the easiest example I have is Len Bias. Okay. Len Bias was good enough to get drafted by the Boston Celtics and never actually played a game in the NBA because he passed away before that. There are things that happen, whether it be minor injuries, whether it be relocations, whether it be finding a new sport, having a relationship, partying too much, getting caught up in the wrong crowd. There's everything and anything in between. So then it comes down to the subjective things. So yes, you might be playing rep and that's as far as you go. You might be playing NBL, and that's as far as you go. You might go to overseas and get the opportunities there, but ultimately bring it back to, if you enjoy the sport of basketball, then you are passionate in a hobby that develops other skills. It develops discipline that you can take into other things. It creates things on your CV and resume that are actually viable in other jobs. If you have shown the dedication to do some coaching or even do umpiring in the sport. These act as jobs, these act as reference points for you to build upon your character. You network, right? So for example, we know each other because of basketball, really. We don't meet otherwise. There's a bit of an age gap. They're not circles that we run in normally. I'm currently living with someone who during high school got me onto their basketball team. We played basketball for about 9-10 years. There are people that you meet, and then funnily enough, when you get older, those people might have a job opportunity for you, or they might introduce you to your future spouse. There's endless opportunities, but it all comes from having, right, the commitment to play basketball and the opportunities to do that. And it also just allows you to have an interest, right? And that's really such an underrated thing. If you're a parent and for some reason you've watched this far and you don't even have a child that plays basketball, and you are wondering, after 2 hours, am I convinced yet? Even if it's not basketball, just get them into something that could potentially become a part of their identity and give them some form of entertainment and fulfillment. And, in my circumstance, I have a very interesting relationship with basketball because now it's pretty much over, and physically I've ruined my body from playing it so much. But if you ask me, would I do it all again? Well, the answer is yes, because I loved it so much at the time, and had a lot of great people to play with and share it with, and went through the process of doing the dunks in the backyard, but also trying to get better, and also having the highs of scoring lots and having the lows of being terrible, everything in between. And if weirdly nothing else, as we circle it in, are you good enough? You're as good as the effort that you put in, and ultimately you're as good as what you perceive yourself to be. And if you work hard at it, I think you can probably self-validate. And if you work hard at it, you'll probably have some form of result that you'll be content with by the end of it.
I think to sum it up is enjoy the journey, right? Enjoy the journey, enjoy the experiences, whether that's as a player, enjoy all the fun and enjoyment, and enjoy that you got out of each area of working on your game. And if it's as a parent, enjoy those opportunities that you were part of, that your child's sort of journey in basketball. And you set your bar high and you reach for it, but at the end of the day, like you said, it's not everyone's going to make the NBA, and that's okay. You put in your hard work and you see where it can take you. So the final section here is sort of just in regards to tying up with what is success is, at the end of the day, I think one of the biggest things I found with my basketball journey is that I was, I put in a lot of work in my game. I wanted to play NBA, which kid didn't as a teenager that loves basketball, they want to play the NBA or play professionally. I never did that for many reasons, okay? But all of the things that I've learned here, probably to a certain extent, to summarize it, leads to me being able to share some of this information to a podcast with hopefully a few other listeners. And it's really just, obviously, also with my opportunities that I had with coaching for about 14 seasons at a rep level, and obviously many more seasons as a domestic level and things like that, you were able to share a lot of these experiences that you acquired. And I think it's a huge positive to be able to, really take something that you were passionate about, perhaps as you were growing up, and all the work you put into that, and be able to share it with others, and ultimately watching others also develop the same level of passion and love of the game, and looking to sort of obviously set their bar as high as possible too, and seeing where that can take them. And I think I think it's a real area where, like we just covered in the last section, that you should be pleased about however far your journey does take you, that you put in your best effort, and whatever you get out of it, you can obviously be able to also share that with others around you that love the game too.
I feel like you should clip my statement from the previous one, because I think I went on this tangent instead of the other one. But look, success is kind of what you define it to be, and the skills that you pick up from this might transfer to other facets of your life, right? Whether it be your social circles or professionally, it's giving you traits, it's giving you skills that you can transfer elsewhere. So, in my profession as a teacher, there's a lot of habits, there's a lot of discipline, there's a lot of things that come out about the journey that are transferable, and that's just in my specific job. But even if it's nothing else, it just gives you a physical outlet that means you might continue that into adulthood and address health concerns that statistically are a major issue in in people as they grow up. So yeah, I feel like you should clip my other thing. That's a better end.